Well, hello everyone. This is Keith Patterson. I am the Associate Director with the Teaching with Primary Sources Western Region. And we are happy to be here today to be part of the Celeste and Kayla's Excellent Birthday Party, the 10-hour telethon edition. I know it's a little bit different, and so we're always happy to be part of this event and supporting Colorado NHD. They've asked us today just to give a really, not quick, but a 1-hour presentation showing some of the great resources that are available at the Library of Congress. And our grant is all about sharing the amazing resources of the Library of Congress, and so we're happy to do that. Along with me today is Kyle, and I'll let him introduce himself.
Hey, my name is Kyle Claiborne. I'm the project coordinator for the TPS Western Region, and I also teach in the journalism department at MSU Denver. So happy to be here with you.
So we are going to do just a quick overview of who we are and our connection to the Colorado National History Day project, and then also walk you through looking at the Library of Congress and kind of just giving you our take on the theme this year, the communication theme. But to start here, here's just a picture of the Library of Congress, which is in Washington, D.C., directly across from the U.S. Capitol. This is a picture or a rendering probably from 1900. Hopefully, if you've been out to DC, you've had the privilege of being able to visit this building. It's one of the most beautiful in DC, and also our nation's library. This is the Jefferson Building. And somebody would just like to show this because it's a nice picture. This currently is Dr. Carla Hayden. She is the 14th Librarian of Congress. She's a great person. She's been in just for a few years now, but she's really had a great focus on public outreach and education and other outreach initiatives at the library. And so they've been very supportive of teachers, and she's been especially supportive of making sure that these materials are available for teaching purposes for teachers and students and other people who can benefit from accessing our nation's library and the resources that are available at it. We're here today because we've been working with National History Day in Colorado program for over a decade. And it's such a great partnership because both the National History Day program and the Teaching with Primary Sources program universally really promote the sort of thinking that is project-based, really focusing on critical thinking about the materials that we're looking at. Student inquiry is a huge thing. Just using primary sources in general is a great way to promote student inquiry. And just really lifetime literacy skills, whether that be, the traditional reading literacy, but also visual literacies and other literacies and ways of communicating and processing information. The National History Day is kind of like a hallmark project for the TPS program. We've been partners on the national level as well as on local level for many, many years. We've worked with Colorado and many other states to really integrate the resource from the Library of Congress into what we do. And at this point, I'm going to hand over to Kyle, and he's going to talk just a little bit of background about the sorts of materials we promote and some of the stuff we're about.
Yeah, so this is an obvious rendering, composite of Abraham Lincoln holding an Apple iPhone. But this kind of embodies, what the TPS program is all about, as Keith was mentioning before. And it's really about, you can't believe everything you see and read, whether it's on the internet or published on in paper, but what another consortium member, Stanford History Education Group, they did a study and they found out that a lot of students in middle school, high school, and undergraduate aren't able to evaluate social media posts, advertisements, things like that, that traditionally didn't need such a keen eye for credibility. And the TPS program really encourages this kind of critical thinking into every aspect of our lives, whether it's audio or images or video or whatever. And the whole project-based system that National History Day runs, it fits perfectly with it. So here is kind of an overview of the Library of Congress collection. So it was established in 1800. During the War of 1812, it was burned down by the Brits, and in 1815, Congress purchased Thomas Jefferson's books of about 6,500 books to start the new Library of Congress. Today, there's over 170 million items, including manuscripts, books, visual materials, sheet music, maps, audio, moving images, But the most important thing I think for students and teachers is this: over 60 million digitized resources are available for free online. So you're going to be able to find something, no matter what it is, that topic that you're researching and going to do for NHD. You're going to be able to find something on the Library of Congress website. So just a quick overview of what a primary source is versus what a secondary source is, and just a short thing of why we should use primary sources with secondary sources. So here is the library's definition. Primary sources are the raw materials of history, the original documents, objects that were created under the time of study. And the secondary sources are those accounts or interpretations of the event. So when we think of primary sources, we're thinking of those original documents that we can look at and use historical thinking skills to find out more about the story behind the picture or behind the manuscript, and really contextualize the whole event or person or place or whatever it is, so that there's a whole body of knowledge, and the critical thinking and self-discovery and inquiry can really come out in these National History Day projects. So I'll hand this back over to Keith.
Yeah, so really, we took a lens. So our next step is we're going to actually hop out to Library of Congress site and really look at some really nice places to start your research on the Library of Congress. It's a huge site. It encompasses several different divisions of the library. And so there's so much information. You can imagine 60 million items on there, or more than 60 million items. You're never going to be able to really get through those. So it's really good to have some nice inroads. And thankfully, we've been working on this project for 16 years at this point. And so we have some tips and tricks for you. There is a lot, and we have an hour to fill, or a little less than an hour to fill at this point. But we really just wanted to have you take a look at the resources and some good places to start out. And with that, I think Kyle's going to hop over and show you. We're going to start just with the teachers page. It's a really nice curated look at the resources, at educational resources that the Library of Congress has to offer.
Yeah, so here's the website. It's loc.gov. On the main page here, if you see under the slider, there's this teachers link here. So it's loc.gov /program/teachers. They just updated this, and we're all really excited. Like, they just updated it on Monday on September 1st. So we're really all excited about the amazing resources that have been really carefully curated by teachers and librarians and people who work in education throughout the years that have worked at the Library of Congress. And that's kind of what the whole teachers page is, or teachers site, is all about. So just to kind of get started here, there's a link at the top at getting started with primary sources. And the nice thing about this is that it really shows everything you need to know about primary sources, using primary sources, learning from, analyzing, finding, everything you need to know. I'll show you first this Teacher's Guide and Analysis tool. And this is really the foundational activity that a lot of educators in social studies and history use. It's called the Primary Source Analysis tool. And this tool is downloadable in a PDF. So you can have students fill out everything here online and email it to you, or print it off, or however you want to do it in this distance learning piece. But it's 3 basic steps: observe, reflect, and question. And I think the important part of this is when you're looking at a primary source and you're thinking about deeply reading it, deeply looking at it, you first want to pull out these observations so that you can use those observations as evidence for your reflections. And those reflections are like inferences that you can make about a primary source, saying based on your observations and your background knowledge. And if you don't have background knowledge, that's okay. That's still an important step to really think about the primary source and what do you think is going on. And that final step is the question step, and that's all about, like, what don't you know about that primary source that you want to figure out. So this is a good place to brainstorm lists of questions that you want to find out for further research. Also on here, they have these teacher guides too. These are, what's nice about these is they have prompting questions depending on the media source, the multimedia source. So you have analyzing oral histories or newspapers or however you want to go about that. If you need a launching point, these are great because they have the questions along with it. So let's see, the other one, I'll show you this video carousel too, which is really nice. If you scroll down a little bit, you'll see these featured videos, and these are nice because these are all teaching pedagogy related, so you can get into here and really learn from the experts in their videos that they've done. And then the Teaching with Library of Congress blog is another one that you can just find a huge wealth of information about primary sources, and a good place to start doing research and seeing what other teachers or students have done. So on this left side here too, I'll show you just real quick the Teachers in Residence program. These teachers are phenomenal, and the nice thing about what they've done with this page is put the blog posts and the resources that each of the teacher in residences have created during their time at the library. So these folks are here really to bring teaching to the Library of Congress and bring that Library of Congress resources out to the general public. So they're a phenomenal resource as well. And here's the Teaching with Primary Sources Partner Program. So this is our overarching Teaching with Primary Sources program. So we're the Western region. There are 3 regional centers, the Western, Eastern, and Midwest, and then there's 36 other consortium members, I think 36. But you can go here on the side and kind of search through the consortium member list, and you can find some in different areas if you're curious. But what's nice is this list of consortium members, and this will continually be updated, so you can kind of go to their websites and find out more information about what they do that's specific to the Library of Congress collections. And they have tons of resources. The civic interactives are also listed here. So this is where you can find, like, Fable Vision is one of the, like, a civics game. iCivics is another one. But yeah, so this is a good place to go to learn more about the TPS program. And then I'll also highlight here this collaboration. So this is collaborations that the library has done with the Teaching with Primary Sources program. And in here, you'll see the NHD theme books in here, but also the National History Day prize that the Library of Congress sponsors that awards each year at the national level. So that's a nice one as well. And just to mention too, that we do have a Colorado specific Teaching with Primary Sources prize as well. And you can learn more about that on the Colorado National History Day website. So I might hand this back over to Keith here just to look over the classroom materials real quick.
Yeah, thanks, Kyle. So probably the heart of it, if you're getting into research, is to start with the classroom materials. And I just always like to preface by looking at this as the way things are structured at the library. So generally, things at the Library of Congress are collected in big groups of things, like people's papers are donated, or they're acquired in some large lot of materials. And so there's lots of ways to look at it, but these are nice because these materials here have all been curated by teachers for teachers and students. And so these are all looked at through the lens of standards and big topics that are taught in schools across the country. And so that's just a preface. This is not the big $60 million pile. These have been curated for education, which is why we present this as the first place to look, because these are already formatted in a way that's going to be easily digestible for education in topics that are already set up. And they do a really nice job of using primary sources as a lens in order for people to use inquiry to get to the history or the other ideas that are being presented. So it really is a nice way to take, so you don't have to search for all those materials yourself, but you can trust that a highly qualified teacher has looked at this and it's been vetted by the educational team at the library. So in any case, these are in 3 categories. We're first going to look at these primary source sets. And what these are thematic based, and there's a bunch of them here, and you can search up at the top just by keywords or themes. And so we don't necessarily need to look at that because we're just going to do a quick glance at this, but we're actually going to look at this second one, this Alexander Hamilton, which has become quite popular because of a little play that you might have heard of. But anyway, so if you've seen the play, and they have it on Disney Plus now, if you've not seen it, it's a great way to get yourself introduced to the founding fathers and the story of Alexander Hamilton. But they've got some of the primary sources that are mentioned in here. So you'll see that there's a variety of things. There's some paintings, there's some maps, there's some published manuscripts. There's a lot of his handwritten notes. There's newspapers. You also saw there's some modern photographs of things. So there's a wide variety of things that will be related to this, but you'll also notice up at the top there's a teacher's guide. So they will give you a little bit of information, background information, so that you're not completely going into this blind. They'll talk a little bit about what resources are in here and how you can teach with them. So they've got suggestions for teachers. And then also some links out to some other things that might help you focus your research. So these are really handy for a teacher as well as a student to come in here and kind of get a curated set of places to launch and start your thing. Like I said, these have been picked as important launching points or big picture stuff for these things. Along with this, as we look at things, looking at the themes. So if you're looking at communication, I thought that the Federalist Papers, or a copy of the Federalist Papers, if you scroll down just a little bit, are here. And so you can use that. And so a great topic would be talk about how the writing of the Federalist Papers influenced the passing of or the adoption of the Constitution and such, the important piece in American history. Huge topic, so you probably need to narrow it down somewhat, but that'd be a good place to start looking at those sorts of things. But there you go. So talking about supporting the new Constitution, how that writing, a lot of it done by Alexander Hamilton, might have been influenced in that. So if we hop back to the classroom material, so that again is the primary source sets. I'm gonna hop back here real quick. We're getting used to the new page as well, so just bear with us. So that was the primary source sets, the very first one there, and that was specifically about Hamilton, but there are 30 or 40 different things that are based in it. The second piece here is the classic lesson plan, and these are sets of materials that are focused around a learning unit. And here you can search, and so here we'll just do a search for Civil War, and you'll see that there's a number of them. The Library of Congress is very strong in Civil War materials, and so you can look at, there's a lot of things, Civil War through the Child's Eye, photographers, different things, maps, other stories. But for communication, it might be interesting to look at that Civil War photographs, the Matthew Brady bunch. So this is looking at the technology used, and specifically about Brady, who took a lot of Civil War photography. What an interesting thing to look into is the technology of photography in the Civil War, or the ways that photography influenced the outcome of the war, how the public perceived the war. Brady was very important in the telling of the story, and mostly when you think of the Civil War, you're thinking of his photographs, and those things are at the Library of Congress and free for you to research and use. So that would be a great resource if that was something your students were interested, or you were interested in taking a look at. And if we hop back, there's one more section that is a great inroad on the teacher's page, classroom materials to look at. And that is the presentations. And these are pieces of materials that are put together primarily just to get some really deep background information into various topics. Right now, this is fairly slim. They're building these as we speak, and this is a new thing. One I thought that was particularly important at this point in time is the elections. And I think since it's a 100th year of women's suffrage, the right to vote is an interesting one. And of course, we're still having conversations about that to this day, but there's three nice pieces here that might be launching points for themes. Foundations of the vote, just talking about how the founding fathers communicated or came to the decisions about our voting system. I mean, it still impacts us today. Could be an interesting way to go through those communications and conversations they had back when they found our country about voting. Also, voting rights for African Americans, still, still very important today. There's lots of things that they go through in that set, going clear back to slavery time to clear up to today. But you can look at that through the primary source record, and that's a curated presentation giving you a lot of good information about that. Voting rights for women, 100th anniversary of women's suffrage this year, and you can go back specifically to the papers of a lot of the people who were influential. If you look at this, the Library of Congress has the papers of most of your people that were involved in that, as well as the records of the National Women's Party. This will give you a nice background of who those people were and links out to their papers and other collections, so it's very handy for you to do this. And then the last one there is Native Americans. That's an interesting story, which we don't need to go into. But, there's some nice launching points there about the stories there and the story of their voting rights. And on, and who can vote today, there's other issues. And of course, it's just one little small sliver of those presentations, but just an interesting on-road. And you can see there's just numerous topics that can be pulled out of just that little tiny section. And I think, Kyle, was there anything else you want to show on the teacher's page, or else we can move on?
The only other thing, I'll just quickly mention the professional development opportunities that they have, and these are constantly being updated too. They have online office hours that are done through the Teaching with LC, Teaching at the Library of Congress, and these are really cool that they have been doing since the whole quarantine thing. So you can really get a good idea of more educational, pedagogical kind of resources here too.
Yeah, I should mention also, Kyle, that our office does provide professional development for teachers, and we largely do that through a granting program too. And we are, like Kyle mentioned, we're the Western United States, so we offer grants up to $20,000 to institutions who can integrate these resources into their teaching through their teachers. So there's more information about that on the TPS page that Kyle is showing here. But you can also get in touch with us. We'll provide contact information. It was at the beginning, or we'll cover that again at the end a little bit. But yeah, feel free to get in touch with us. We'd be happy to talk about that. We're here to help get these materials out. That's why we're here today, sharing this with you. And with that, I think the next piece, so really we've just looked at just the teacher's page. So you can imagine these are just the curated materials, and there's already a wealth of information there. Taking a step up from that, looking more into that bigger pool of resources at the library, a really nice place to go is into the researchers. So obviously NHD projects are going to involve some research. And so there's a bunch of great research tools. This will actually guide you into the different research areas that they have. We find probably the easiest and most approachable way is to go over onto that little quick links on the side that we're pointing to here and go to the research guides.
And I will point out too that this link is on the left side of the teacher's page as well, if you'd like to get it through it that way.
And if you've used the Library of Congress before, this is a fairly new thing, which actually is very handy. And through this, you can see here, if you're just browsing and looking for something, you could go through this long list of 73 subjects, and these all have breakdowns. But for our purpose, just to kind of show you what this looks like topically, go down to the gender and women's studies, again, kind of looking at this idea of women's voting. They have right there, the first one is the 19th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, primary documents. If you click on that, you'll see you get this really nice research guide, and this will give you a launching point to resources at the Library of Congress and actually elsewhere. So you'll see they'll give you an introduction, and this again is a great place to get some background information, especially as it pertains to the collections of the library. Also on the left-hand side there, you'll see there's a little side menu. We have digital collections, which we'll hop back to in a second, but I wanted to point out there, there's also related online resources. So these are a great launching point for looking for other research areas. And the nice thing about these is these have been vetted by the librarians at the library and the research experts at the Library of Congress. And so they usually have a very exhaustive listing of resources here. And these are things at the Library of Congress on this page. And then if you go to the external websites, this will give you stuff that is off of the Library of Congress website that they rely upon as external sources that have been vetted and high quality. So as you can see, this is a really nice place to guide a student into looking for some research, because it gives them things the Library of Congress which have been collected and vetted, other resources, and then things externally. And then they also have a print resources areas there. So obviously the Library of Congress is a library, so you can use this as a place to find physical books so that you should be able to track down at your local library or interlibrary loan or find digital copies of them. So again, just a great place to start research. As far as we're concerned here, I'd also like to look at those digital collections on that. That's the second item on that sidebar. And as I mentioned, so the Library of Congress does have the papers of a lot of the major players in the women's suffrage movement. And so you see here, the digital collections are collections of things that are related to the topic. And so you can see we have Carrie Chapman Catt papers, Claire Barton, Elizabeth Canton Staney, historic newspapers. So they'll link out the Chronicling America project is or is a partner with the Library of Congress. So they have an amazing collection of historic newspapers, which we're actually going to look at here in just a minute. But there's links to those here. Again, Mary Church Terrell. Again, the American Women Suffrage Association, and on and on and on and on and on and on and on. So they're librarians. They love to gather information and give you tons of information. So you can see just in that one little area, we have days of research that we could conduct, high quality, internal to Library of Congress as well as external. I think this is a great launching point for research for an NHD project. Obviously, there's other places you can look, but why not leverage the power of our nation's library to start your project? So that's pretty much the guides we're looking at. Tons of ideas here, again, with the women's suffrage. You can look at how any of these people change the narrative about the right for women to vote and the eventual changing of the U.S. Constitution over time. So there's just tons of stuff here. Kyle's just pulling up some nice primary sources to look at.
Yeah, just showing the zoomed in view of these.
So there's just tons of good information. And with that,
so these are those are the digital collections from the research guides, but also to show you, to jump back to the main page here, to show you the digital collections from the main page. So this will include all of the digital collections, not in any, they're in order, like alphabetical order when you do it, but you can also, the nice thing about just the digital collections is you can search just within the digital collections and get those collections that include, something about the Civil War is what I just searched.
And keeping in mind, these are just how the library collects them. Again, I like to think of these as grandma's trunk. So these were a collection of items that were given to the library, and so that's how they're categorized at the library. And it kind of makes sense when you look through these. There are people's papers or other things that were donated. So these are just a collection. This is the page, the homepage, landing page for these collections.
Yeah, and this is just like another good place to start your research, to gather ideas, and but also to broaden and deepen your research too. If you have one specific event that you know about Civil War, for example, you can go and contextualize it within these collections, which is a nice kind of tactic. So you'll see them all, and I'm just going to do a search for communication. We'll see what comes up, and you'll see they have some ideas on, this will give you some ideas on what you could write about with communication, and keep in mind too that this is only the digital collections that explicitly have the word communication in one of the sources or in the collection summary. So there might be other resources as well, but just some topic ideas. Transportation and communication is a great one to explore how the maps are used to communicate information about the country's development. Posters from World War I are phenomenal propaganda posters, and how they are used during wartime to reach a government's people, for example. Finding Our Place in the Cosmos, that's another great one. This is the Carl Sagan collection, from Galileo to Sagan and beyond, and it's really all about how complex ideas about math and science are communicated to the public, and it's such a great collection as well. So if I hop back here to the digital collections, the main one I think I want to show is this Chronicling America. And Keith, did you want to do this one?
Yeah, we had mentioned, historic newspapers are a great tool. It's kind of interesting because if you think about primary and secondary sources, it's kind of an interesting conversation because newspapers are typically considered a secondary source. But in this case, We're looking at how something, an idea or an event was communicated over time. And so newspapers are like a time machine. You can step back in time and track historic events through an edition of a newspaper over time, or in different places of our country, or in this case, you can even search by different languages, so how different ethnic communities were seeing the same and reporting the same event. So this is a huge collection. It spans 1789 to 1963, and that continues to range for, they are adding to it constantly, and then it's a partnership with the National Endowment of the Humanities, and they give out grants every year to enlarge their collections, and so they give money out to organizations to scan, digitize, and in OCR, so you can read the papers and such. So basically what this does is they scan them all, and all the words and texts are all entered in here, so you can search the text of newspapers over hundreds and hundreds of years. And there are all sorts of advanced search tools, which we will probably not look at today, but you can kind of get an idea. So Kyle searched for Claire Barton, and it's pulling up those examples, and you can see everywhere her name is mentioned, it's highlighted in pink there. So such a powerful tool to see how they were these historical figures were depicted in the media. And as you can see, you can zoom right in on these. They've got all sorts of tools to snip these out. You can download them as a PDF. So if you just need a piece of this for your project, you can just snip it out. It'll output it as a file that you can load into your paper, your video, your website, any sort of thing. So a great tool for research. Different kind of research, but interesting all the same. So Kyle just used that snipping tool to just snip that out, and you can see you can just grab that image. So it's one of Kyle and my favorite tools when we're doing research, is to dig into this collection, because it's just so rich and vast. And I literally think it's like a time machine when you're doing research, as you can step through day to day in some cases of historic topics. My favorite way to, Kyle, go ahead.
I was just going to side note, speaking of a time machine, the main page has this 100 years ago today, and that this is so much fun just to go see what was going on in the newspapers 100 years ago today. Yeah. Whether as, an analysis project or whatever.
Or even just a morning wake up, what happened 100 years ago, and just look at it. It's even fun looking at the mix of news and advertisements is always my favorite thing. But anyway, so my favorite place, or my recommended way of diving into these collections, is actually go into what they call the recommended topics over here on the sidebar on the left there. And what this does is these are curated links to information and backup information for different subjects. And so for our cases here, we'll go to the subject category. And for communication, I thought a good way to look at that, there's a section here on science, technology, and innovation. So you can see right here is just, and all of these you could find something to fit with the theme this year, but I thought this one was a particularly interesting way to look through this. You see you have airmail. Of course, you could write you could do an amazing project about airmail. Darwin, again, the way he communicated all his stuff. Electric chair, well, that would be an interesting way to see how the media reported the electric chair. Yeah, on and on and on. I thought just to be literal here, we could just look at the telephone, the invention of the telephone here. And just to kind of show you an example of what shows up in this particular Chronicle America piece. So it starts off, it'll give you just a general overview of what that is. And I think this is a pretty cut and dry one, because we all know what a telephone is, or at least we will for a little bit longer with history as it is. But it has information. It'll give you a timeline, which is hugely important when you're looking at newspapers. So you can kind of have key times of major things that happened with this. So you can see patent, and when the first call was made, and when it was exhibited at a exhibition, Supreme Court rulings, and first continental telephone calls. So these are important times that were reported in the newspaper. If you go up to where it says read more about it, this will actually get you links to search strategies, which for this is fairly cut and dry, but if you have a more hidden topic, they'll give you some things that will help with the historic language, because researching in databases like the Library of Congress, they're primary sources, so they're going to be using language from the day. And so it's helpful to have some search strategies and to know what words and people and terms are going to be helpful for searching. Um, heading back this way. And then also on there was, we're getting back there.
Yep, sorry.
And if you go back to read more about it again, because the second part of that I wanted to point out, the selected articles from Chronicle America. So this is where you actually can get to actual articles in the collection, so you can see the actual newspaper clips related to it. So this again is very helpful because you don't have to go wading through those hundreds of years of newspapers. The librarians at the library have already curated those for you. So I think an interesting one to look for an example of that is to look at the birth of the telephone. And this was how one newspaper reported the birth of the telephone. So there's a picture of Alexander Graham Bell there. You can see that telephone is highlighted in pink because that's the search term. They have some pictures of the first telephone there. And then this article itself actually goes into how it works, or at least and the person who wrote the article's take of it. So it's a very interesting way to see how the telephone was reported in its time, because you can imagine we see it as kind of just a utility in our house, or whatever, for those who still have an actual telephone in our house. Actually, I do not. So, but I remember when I did. Um, but you can see the early examples of it, which is kind of interesting to look at it. In the collections of the library also are Alexander Graham Bell's papers. So if you actually want to see his patent drawings and his lab notes from these devices, you can look at those too. We won't go into that today, but if that's your topic, that's another thing to go hunting for. We'll give you some additional strategies on how to look for that. But
point out, just for students out there, your citation information is right here at the bottom if you're using Chronicling America stuff.
Again, another way the Library of Congress is very helpful for NHD students. Every piece of information will have a bibliographic page, and on it will give you citation help as well. And we'll show you that as we dive into some other collections as well. But I think that kind of shows the newspapers. We can hop back and even show just real quick the advanced search, Kyle. I think that might be helpful just to see that and show the tools. He's got to hop back through again. So back again to the digital collections and Chronicling America. You can get to Chronicling America directly at that URL, the chroniclingamerica.loc.gov. Or just search Google for Chronicling America, it'll pop right up. But the advanced search up there, I just wanted to show real quick. You can do a simple search just by framing it in dates, or you can do it by state, specific to the newspaper. They actually give you a list up the upper right. They have a U.S. newspaper directory, 1860 to present, which has all the newspapers published in the United States pretty much since we've been considered, or before we were a country. But they're all in there. So if you're looking geographically for one area, you can either do a state or the specific newspaper, and you can use that U.S. newspaper directory to get you there. And then you can also narrow by year or date range. Like I said, language, because they have that keyed in here. So if you want to look for a German language newspaper, you can do that. You can limit it from the search front page or all pages. You can use fancy searching, such as you can use any of the words, all of the words, or the phrase, so you can limit how it looks at those words, or even just with the words within 5 words of each other. So it actually will help you hunt things down. So that a very helpful research tool. It gets a little complicated at that point, but I like to point out that exists for when you're doing research. And I think that's probably what I'm going to cover for the historic newspapers in the Chronicling America. I also want to point out just real quick that if you're doing a Colorado topic, the materials that are on the Chronicling America project are a little thin because Colorado has its own historic newspaper collection at coloradohistoricnewspapers.org. The interface is very similar. They have search, browse, and then the topics is kind of handy because they have, just like on those recommended topics, they have some Colorado topics that are already pre-populated there. It's up on the top in the red right there. Kyle's driving for us today and I'm making him work. But so they have some featured topics there. So that's just another resource. There's many other historic newspaper collections, but I just like to point out this one in particular. If you're doing a Colorado topic, that's a helpful place to know about. And I think that's all I have for historic newspapers, unless Kyle, you had something. Otherwise, I think we'll hop over and start looking at just some general searching the big pool or the entire Library of Congress collections.
Yeah, so we just did a bunch of kind of searching around and browsing and trying to hone our topic and figure out specific primary sources. So this is a quick and dirty on how to search the Library of Congress. So once you have a topic and you've gathered some basic who, what, when, where, and why information, the Library of Congress main page is a great place to start the research. Just with this universal search bar up top, you can, if you know the type of multimedia you want, if you know you want an audio recording or a photograph, let's say, you can search just within that filter. But I usually recommend just kind of starting at the top and starting at the main universal search everything, just to kind of see what's out there. So the main thing I think is this isn't like Google, it's like your library, your local library. So a good idea to start is to brainstorm a list of keywords for your topic. Just write as many things as you can down, talk about, or write things down like names, places, events, people, time frames, to help you hone in and narrow down your search on the LOC, because you're not going to want to search what happened during the Civil War on the LOC. You're going to want to search like specific people's names or things like that. And it's not that you can't search the overall Civil War, you just want to get deeper into it. So another hint for searching is considering Boolean search terms. So these work with any library site basically, and I believe they work with Google as well, but this is just using and, or, not, and quotation marks. So when you search, so for example, I'm just going to search like children and poverty. So what this will do is get you, it'll narrow your search to retrieve only records containing just or both of those terms. So it'll leave out anything that has children but not poverty, and the other way around. So the or broadens your search, but the or is helpful when there might be different spellings or different ways to, historically, different ways to spell something is a good example of that. So labor or labor with a U. So that's a good way to broaden it to include all of that. The not is a good way to narrow your search to exclude records containing the term associated with the not. So if I want to do Caribbean, but not Cuba. So I want to get everything about the Caribbean, but I don't want anything about Cuba. That's a good way to do that. And quotation marks, I think, will be your best friend if you're looking for something that is specifically Civil War and you want that language to be exact. That's when you use quotation marks. So if I want Civil War to exactly appear in it, otherwise, if you just search Civil War, for example, you might get things about civil that doesn't have to do with war, and you might get wars like World War II, for example, that doesn't have to do with the Civil War. So those are just some good quick and or not Boolean search terms to help fill in and narrow down your search. To kind of keep on the theme of communication and the telephone, I'm going to search for telegraph. So as you'll see, there's 215,000 items, way too many items to go through. So use these filters or faucets on the left side of the search. Use them to your advantage. They're your best friend. So let's search by manuscript. And I'm just going to scroll down a little bit here, but this is pretty cool. I obviously know where this is at, but this is the first telegraph message ever sent. This is a pretty cool resource, but you can click on it and zoom into the specific one. And it's all high resolution once it ends up loading. But what I'll show you here too is the bibliographic information that's always at the bottom of any of the resources. You'll get a title, which is the title of the resource when it was given to them. Created or published is obviously when it was created or published. It could be, that number could be different if you're analyzing it based on that, the historical context of the time. Subject headings are nice for extra ideas for keyword searching. Like, if you search telegraph, you found this and then you didn't know who Samuel Finley Breese Morse is, that could be another launching point to search off of. And then the genre is the type of multimedia, and then notes is another nice place where the librarian or archivist will put in whatever information that they absolutely know to be true about it, or they will put in like a transcription of the words in the primary source to help you understand it better. The other thing I'll show you too is just so you know the rights and access, if you can download it, it's out of copyright and you can use it. And the nice part about these resources too is that you can, so here's the resource, here's how you download it. You got a bunch of different quality of the download that you want, depending on your needs, whether if you're printing it or just using it in a slideshow or whatever, you can get what you need there. So the other thing too is the cite this item. So this is for students, depending on your citation style that you're using. These are all the APA citation style. I do have to say though that since they did update to APA 7, I'm not sure if these are exactly right. So it's still recommended that you take these, look at the style guide if you're going by the new APA style. These should be good for APA 6, but I'm not sure about APA 7. So let's see, what else? You had some topic ideas, didn't you, Keith, for the Telegraph?
Obviously, you know, there's people involved. What else I have in here? Yeah, just investigating the impact of the telegraph. You could look at the progression of communication inventions over time. It's a huge topic, but you could pick out certain pieces. We have, you know, telegraph, telephone, and then it gets really complicated as it gets more recent. But you know, we have satellites and all sorts of other crazy stuff.
What was this?
Even specific how telegraphs change history, that communication, that ability to rapidly communicate across great distances was a huge change to our society, and that could be something that you should look into. And go ahead, Kyle.
You wanted to go into here too, right? So here's the part of selection. So this is nice over here. They have links to what collections it's part of or the dates that you can search specifically. But if you click on that part of the Samuel Morse, this is really cool. It's the, Keith, you showed me this. I don't know if you want to talk about it a little bit.
Yeah, and I really don't know much about it, but it shows that it's a patent for a railroad telegraph, which, you know, if you're interested in STEM or any of that sort of thing in the history of those, if you really got a science kid, it's very interesting to look at this technical drawing of a railway telegraph in 1838. So this is early on in when this all was occurring, but very interesting. I'd not seen this until I was doing some research about communication. So always have a chance to learn at the Library of Congress. But yeah, also just really pointing out on that sidebar that there's, if you go back there, Kyle, on the bib page, just any of them, that those are all hot linked. And so these are all offshoots for additional research. You know, the part of is a really helpful one. The subjects is another really important one for doing research, because you might wonder why Annie G. Ellsworth is related to this one. And interesting to look up and see why. That might lead you down to a road that would broaden your story in an incredibly meaningful way.
And sometimes they'll have too this featured in on a bibliographic page. So if the source has been used in one of their articles or something, they'll give you the featured in. So this one's featured in Today in History, which is just another good resource that you can access. But this will go farther in depth. So this is actually written about.
There we go. That probably tells us about what that drawing was about.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, reading for later. Okay. Kyle, I think we probably have about just a little over 10 minutes to go. So I think we'll just cover a few more things. So I think those are, at that point, those are really the great inroads on there. We had the teachers page. We had the research guides. We had the digital collections, which included the historic newspapers. We had just searching the Library of Congress, which we just went through. I did want to hop down and just really close with another area called the exhibits, which is in the trending piece of the main page at loc.gov. Halfway down the page, it's also loc.gov/exhibits. But like any cultural institution, the Library of Congress has exhibits in the physical spaces of the Library of Congress in the Jefferson Building. So currently, they have these particular exhibits. And so they always will have the physical exhibit, and then they'll have an online companion to it. So these are current ones. Let's just go ahead and look at that comic art, because this might be something engaging for kids. And surprisingly, you can do some amazing research. Not amazing. We know it's very incredible things you can pull from comics, because the pop culture gives you an interesting insight into history. But you'll see that it'll give you a little bit of an overview, and then they'll have the exhibit items and other stuff related to any of these exhibits. But just pop in there, Kyle, to the early years, and just show some of these early comic books. And Kyle and I actually did a project with the first and third one, the Yellow Kid and the first successful comic book strip. We actually did a long-term thing at Pop Culture Con a couple of years ago about the Yellow Kid and his comic strip, which in this case there was several versions of it. This is McFadden's Row of Flats, but it tells a lot about the history of immigration in New York, and as well as the formation of yellow journalism. And there's a story to investigate there. But really the first comic to become popular and take on some of the comic formats that we're seeing these days. You may have seen the little kid with the billboard shirt, but there's a very interesting story behind that. So just a little tiny sliver out of this exhibition, and there's a very interesting project. You talk about comic books and communicating, communication and yellow journalism and journalism in general at the turn of the 20th century.
Yeah,
so that's just one. Go ahead, Kyle.
Sorry, this all fits right in with what we're doing today. Yellow journalism is the fake news at the turn of the 19th century or the 20th century. So this is like a perfect connection to today, and especially in terms of the communication part of what the media is putting out and what the consumer is digesting from the media. So this is just a great inroad to that.
Yeah, just interesting fact that yellow journalism got its name from the Yellow Kid, so it actually came from a comic book, and really out of the fact that they could print yellow in newspapers, and that's why he was yellow, or at least that's the story. That's the popular story, and there's some debate on that, but that's generally the take on it. So as far as exhibits go, if we hop back, and you kind of have to just backpedal here a little bit, and back to the exhibits page. So those are the ones that are currently there. So that's just a few, and there's obviously a bunch of good stuff. Rosa Parks, women's suffrage, comic books we looked at, but maps, another amazing communication tool. But also, if you, on the right-hand side there, and Kyle pointed out, view all exhibits. And so these, not only the ones that are currently there, but they just archive the ones that were there in the past, and there's hundreds of them. I think hundreds of them here, and any of these would be worthy of a look for a topic idea. So you can just scroll through and see what piques your interest or your students' interest, and obviously then dig in and learn a little bit about a subject. I mean, it might take you a while to get through here, but certainly a lot of things to investigate across the board as far as different takes on topics and subject matter and the sorts of things that are in the collections at the library. So that's a quick take on the exhibits, just another place to kind of take an inroad, really rich in background information, and really also curated the best of the best as far as was related to what was on exhibit. They'll pull, exhibits, they pull out their best and brightest and borrow the best and brightest to have in those exhibits. So it's always interesting to see what a curator's take on these particular topics are. Rosa Parks, which is a recent acquisition to the library. They have an exhibit on her right now, which is another interesting thing to delve into. So let's see, exhibits. So we've still got a little bit of time, so we can delve into a couple of other things. Kyle, you want to talk a little bit about maybe Ask a Librarian?
Yeah, sure. So I just scrolled down. This is the main page again. I just scrolled down to the Your Library section. So this will show you, this is like if you're going to the library itself, but this is where they have the Ask a Librarian section. So if you click on this, you just have, this will give you a place where you can't find anything, you've done the research, you know something's there, or you found a dead link that you're trying to get a resource you just really want to use, or it's out of copyright, but you still want to get some more information about it. This is kind of where you go. So this is the Ask a Librarian section. They have amazing librarians at the library that will generally get back to you within 24 to 48 hours, depending on the day. But you can also live chat with them if this little icon pops up when you're going. So you'll see this if you click on like digital collections, so this is going to kind of ask you to narrow down your path so that they can get to the specific person to ask the question to. So the teacher resources, I think, is probably the best one for students and teachers, because then you'll get somebody that is embedded into the teaching aspect of it. So another place, just real quickly, I want to show the labs. So this is a innovative project that the Library of Congress has been doing. It's labs.loc.gov, and they have some really cool projects in here, and you can scroll through. But the one that I wanted to highlight was this. So if we go to work and then experiments, the one that I wanted to highlight is this Southern Mosaic. And this is just a phenomenal project. What they've done is they've taken the metadata and the visualizations and the audio from the John and Ruby Lomax collections, which are a huge collection of folk songs from the 1930s and 40s. But they've done this and put it into this like storyboard interactive website. And all this information is pulled from the Library of Congress. So this is like if you're looking for specifically for John Lomax kind of stuff, this is a great one to go to.
Yeah, we thought it'd be interesting just because his story is amazing as far as communication. I don't know if you're familiar with Lomax, but he's kind of the one who saved the American folk song by going and traveling, not just in the South. Through his entire life, he traveled all around the world collecting folk music and recording it and interviewing people. But this is just one trip that he took through Texas in the South. You know, I think in the 20s it was, I think, Kyle. But so he recorded it, and he was working for the Library of Congress. So now this all is available to the American people because he did that on behalf of the librarian. So it's archived there. So all his papers and recordings are all there. And what this particular thing did is we had somebody who took the metadata and created this very interesting interactive map that traces the route that has links out to all his journal entries and recordings. You know, maybe not the best place to research, but we thought it was an interesting communication related topic and kind of a fun extra thing. The labs is kind of a hidden gem, as we'd like to call it at the library. It's kind of only accessible. I think you can dig into the site and find it, but if you know the labs at loc.gov, you can always see what they actually have a person on staff called the Innovator in Residence. That's a position that somebody gets put in there, and they do all sorts of interesting stuff, and then their projects kind of get warehoused here. They're doing stuff as well as departments are playing around with ideas, really largely around the idea that the metadata of the collection of the Library of Congress, which is hundreds of millions of bits of information, are open source, and you can do what you want with them. And so they're taking that metadata database and doing things with it. And these are the sorts of things that smart, tech savvy people are doing with it. But it also is very interesting to, you know, get another take on the collections at the Library of Congress. Kyle, I think we have probably about 5 minutes. So we could talk about, what else we want to talk about as our final hurrah. I think maybe a nice thing to talk about is a little bit about, I think you're going to hear from some of the other partners of the NHD Colorado program, but we just wanted to kind of point out some things with our partners. Obviously, History Colorado has been a big collaborator of ours, and would recommend using them as a resource for your research. They have a ton of great information. I think Kyle's going to try to pull up some stuff. But they have some nice online resources as well, as you can visit there and do research in the Hart Research Library. Hopefully, once time allows us to do that, and we can get out safely again. But they have a ton of good information there. Colorado Encyclopedia would be a great place to look as well. We've partnered with them, and a lot of, if you're not aware of what the Colorado Encyclopedia is, the Colorado Humanities has been working on this collection of resources specifically around Colorado in all ways, shapes, and forms. And they have a bunch of cool tools. And Kyle, I'll let you talk about that. I don't need to talk all day.
Oh, that's okay. Check out Colorado Encyclopedia. It's done through the Colorado Humanities, and this is just a phenomenal resource for all things Colorado. And These are really helpful, like the timelines, the maps to kind of visualize your information and to put it into neater boxes, if you will, for educators and for struggling readers, things like that. They have these leveled articles that are really helpful to learn about a topic that are in 4th, 8th, and 10th grade reading levels. Likewise, they have these teacher resources that are, you'll see articles with teacher resources that these are collections and encyclopedia entries that have that also have annotated resource sets or other primary sources that go along with it included in the encyclopedia entry. So again, just another amazing place to go. For different languages too, you can translate the whole web page and read it to you in a different language. If you have English language learners in your class as well. And just to show you real quick, here's the History Colorado. I was having trouble finding a link before. Make sure they're not left out. They're just an amazing resource. And finally, I think Colorado Experience, just real quickly, these are documentaries done through Rocky Mountain PBS. Well, that link doesn't work anymore. That's okay. You can just search Experience.
So yeah, that's a project by Rocky Mountain PBS, and it's an Emmy award-winning Colorado series. So they have all sorts of stories about Colorado, and we've been a partner on that project and done some professional development with them. But if you're looking for Colorado topics, whether they're connected to national or other stories, also a great place to look for things. And I think with that, I think they're also presenting today, so check out their presentation. Mm-hmm. But on top of that, I think that pretty much is our time. So Kyle, if you could head back to our slide so people know how to get a hold of us.
Sure.
There's our contact information. Grab it while you can, or pause the recording and grab it later. I'll let that clear itself up. Yeah, so that's our website's there. We also run a blog called tpsconnect.org. You can get, mostly Kyle's writing on that one, but it's got great information about lesson plans, ideas, and other things in general about teaching with primary sources. Yeah, email us, follow us, all those things. We'd appreciate to hear from you. And if you're interested in doing this sort of things with your students or such, get a hold of us and we'd be happy to talk. That's what we do.
Yeah, thanks everybody.
Yeah, thanks everybody. And enjoy the rest of your time.